And if you look at all the countries that were ex-Soviets, the women are all fleeing those countries to get men abroad because they were taught coming out through school because of priority hiring even during the Soviet era that the men were nothing. They were no good. They were the fault for all the world's previous problems. And they were marrying everybody outside their countries, selling themselves really. That's what they do. And that's what they want to do in Africa and elsewhere, so that they can conquer them and the men will stand up for nothing when they have nothing to stand up for. This is warfare tactics. Do you understand? Warfare tactics in large parts of the Western world. Britain is said to be the flagship. The sharply rising numbers of babies with foreign-born mothers came despite an overall fall in births. You see, the overall fall in births happens because the native-born people can't even get someone to marry her mate with, and they don't want children because it has been drummed into them. Charles Galton Darwin was right. They rather would like to have a sports car or a washing machine. So the only ones who are coming in who are immigrants who haven't had that indoctrination. They are happy to have children, naturally. Something that they used to have in those countries that are falling apart. The UN has said that China is the model for the world to copy. That's what they like. They like an obedient population working for peanuts in factories all day, locked in and obeying their superiors and obeying their own type of Politburo. Obedience is very important to these freaks at the top. Under the Royal Institute for International Affairs Charter, they say they will not pull out of countries until they have stabilized the country and set up the identical British system in that country. Then they withdraw. That's what they did with India, by the way, and Carol Quigley talked all about that process. It's the same now in all the countries that they go into. I watched programs where they bring in the World Health Organization, WHO, and UNESCO into the countries they conquer, or into so-called primitive tribes who have never seen people before. And they are always there to help people, to help them. And sure enough, they got their vaccination shots and all the rest of it. Their IQ drops. They get easier to manage, and before you know, they are conquered and dependent on this system, whereas before they were totally independent. They didn't need money, for instance. They got their own food for themselves. They built their own huts, a way they lived for thousands of years. People don't realize what's being happening. The media never makes a big deal out of anything, and they keep us really in a fantasy land. They give us the politics nonsense of left-wing, right-wing. You are supposed to think this is one man who is making things go bad for you. And they have done it with one president or prime minister one after another. It makes no difference who they are. They are just frontmen. And even those frontmen will only know and be told what their part in this whole world agenda is. And no more. It is always on a need-to-know basis. And UNESCO's job, of course, is not only to make a standardized education across the world, a socialized education, but it is also to raise the future community leaders by placing them in public regimes. This has been an ongoing way to do things since the World War II. The Soviets went so far as to lock people up as mentally ill if they wanted to retain individuality and make their own opinions on society in which they were living. They called it inflexibility of opinion. That was a mental disorder in the Soviet system, and it shortly will be here too, because we have all to get our psychiatric assessments every so often under the new system. So, you are really in a managed society. They know exactly where they are taking the whole world. And all the experts tell you how to behave. That's also predictive programming, because you are programmed to expect things which they tell you about. So, we are living in a planned society. The people would come to love their servitude, according to Julian Huxley. That is actually happening today because there is so much entertainment. As we are brought down into austerity, austerity is poverty, so it doesn't seem so bad. It's a unique thing to have so much entertainment as we are brought down. Otherwise there would be massive riots. Of course they do expect riots, but not in the same context with everyone rioting. Always the first ones at the bottom do riot first. When welfare is being cut back, expenses of course go up all the time in all classes, but the first ones do feel it the hardest. And governments are well organized to deal with it way ahead of time. Nothing happens by chance on a global scale, because it's planned that way. Your culture is given to you generation by generation. Science controls your behavior and makes you think you are free at the same time. You are living through a planned society planned by people who give you world wars as well. These wars are also to alter society. Quigley said it gets more done in 5 years of war than 50 years of peace and propaganda. War is always used. That is why they are using the war on terror that is projected to go on forever. Massive changes until the utopia for the few, while the rest of us, who will become sterile, is going to die off quickly.